I want to take a little time to talk about how to populate a select list or a drop down on a web page using ASP.NET Razor syntax. This code right here is all HTML, none of it's Razor. But what you can see is I have a select list. This is going to represent a drop down on our web page, and two options inside of that drop down. And I'm going to go ahead and run this. And you can see I have this drop down. That's what the select tags are generating. And I have two choices, Huskers and Cowboys. That's because the display text is right here inside of the options tags, Huskers and Cowboys. Now the value is something different. This is Lincoln, which is relating to Huskers, and Laramie, which is relating to Cowboys. Behind the scenes, if somebody were to make a selection, even though they're visually selecting Huskers, behind the scenes they're kind of selecting Lincoln as the value. Cowboys is the visual representation of Laramie. And if there was a submit button on this page and they click submit and it sent that choice to a server somewhere, what would come across is either the value of Lincoln or the value of Laramie. But this is just HTML. There's no Razor, no ASP.NET going on here. And that's what's rendering this select box. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to write some Razor that replaces this select, that generates this select box using Razor syntax. I want to start by talking, in order to do this, you have to have a fairly good understanding of ASP.NET MVC. You understand that there is a controller and there's a view, and you're passing your model back and forth between your controller and your view, or from your controller to your view. I think I'll start off by explaining this this home controller. What it's doing is it's declaring a brand new team. It's setting the team city to Lincoln and the team name to Huskers. And then it's instantiating a second team, setting its team name to Laramie and its team name to Cowboys. One team and a second team. You might ask, well, where did team come from? Well, down here there's another class in this file that declares two properties, team name and team city, which is what are being used up here. So we're just declaring a new instance of the team class right here on line 14. And we're using the properties of that team class, team city and team name, and we're setting them independently. Here's a second instantiation of the team class. Then what we're doing is we're instantiating a view model class. Something we created, something I created. And I'm adding on, and if you wonder where the view model is coming from, it's coming from down here. This is a class. It's just called view model, nothing special. And it has a public item on it, member on it, that is called teams. And what teams is just a variable name, and it is of type a list of teams, a list of singular teams. And I'm storing that list, that are kind of array, if you will, of teams, of team in this teams variable. This is going to be a collection of teams. So what we're doing here on line 22 is we're instantiating a new view model. We're going and we just called it VM, but vm.teams, this thing right here, we're adding to it the first team, Team Nebraska. The next line is doing the same thing, adding Wyoming, the Team Wyoming team, to our collection of teams. And that collection of teams is a property on our view model class, and we're passing the entire view model back to our view. So this was there was a lot here, so I think I'll just explain it again. In this file, we have three classes. We have we have this home controller class, but we also have this team class and this view model class. The team class has the team name and team city on it. These are just properties because they have getters and setters. They are strings. And the view model has a list of teams inside of it. And what we're doing here on line 22 is spinning up or newing up a new view model, and we're adding some teams to it. Teams that we made up here. And we're sending the entire view model, which has teams in it, back to our view. So let me jump over to the view. And the view right at the top says, hey, the model coming in is of type view model. We know that because if I'm back at the home controller, this VM really is of type view model. It's instantiating a new view model. So the first page of our view is saying, hey, the model that's coming in is of type view model. And we have an HTML tag and a body tag and an end HTML tag and an end body tag. But inside of here, inside the body, we have razor markup, and we can tell that by a lot of times by the yellow highlighting. It's saying, hey, razor markup is between these two braces, between this brace on line 6 and this closing brace on line 11. This will be razor. And the first line is saying, and this is C#. The first line is saying, I'm going to declare a variable called options. And I'm going to set it to a brand new select list. This is a type provided by Microsoft. And I have to send it my list of things, which we know comes from the model, is our teams. And we have to tell it, what are you going to use as the option value, this thing right here, and what are you going to use as the display name? Well, back over here, I'm saying I want to use the team's city property as the option value, this thing over here, and the team's name as the display name. I think if I hover over select list, I get a little bit of definition around it. I can see that the first parameter, the IEnumerable items, that's our list of teams. And the second parameter is a string, that is the property on our team that they use to populate this value. That's going to be team city. And the third parameter coming into the select list is the team name, saying that that's the display text I want to use. And all it's doing is declaring this select list. And it's this code right here that's actually creating a drop-down list, creating a select tag. And it's saying, go ahead and name this select tag something like teams, but use the options that I provided up, that I created up here, as the items, the options in that select list. So I'm going to run this, and I'll come back to this and explain this again, because I think there's a lot here and it gets a little complex. But this code right here was generated from that razor, from this razor. If I right click and I do view source, I can see that there's a select tag. I didn't write that select tag. Line 9 over here did. And it called it teams. It gave it a name and an ID of teams because of this first parameter right here. And I passed in the options to use. And it says, okay, well, in that options variable, you had a couple things. You had in the model teams, you had the Lincoln Huskers and the Laramie Cowboys in your teams. How did they get there? Well, back in the controller again, we added those teams right here. And we passed that whole view model back to the view. So when it got here, it knew that model.teams had Laramie and Lincoln as their teams. I'm going to set a breakpoint on this line right here. And I'm going to come over to our home controller and I'm going to set a breakpoint right here. And I'm just going to restart our application. And it started at our home controller. And I'm going to walk through this. I'm going to hit this button right here, F10. I'm going to step through it. It's declaring a new instance of team. It's setting the team city to Lincoln, setting the team name to Huskers, declaring another team, setting its team, the second instance, to Laramie, its team city to Laramie and team name to Cowboys. And then it's declaring a brand new instance of our view model class, and it's adding to its team's property. First, it's adding Nebraska, then it's going to add Wyoming, and it's going to pass the entire view model class, including the teams that are inside of it, back to our view. Now we're on our view. If I hover over model, I can see it's got one property in it, teams, and it's got two items in it. One that's Lincoln, and the other item is Laramie. And what it's going to do is it's going to use team city property as the options value and team name as the options display text. So I'm going to hit F10 again. I'm going to come up here and hit F10. And it's all it did on line 7 was declare a variable for those options. Now over here it's saying go ahead and create a select tag, call it teams, and populate it with these options. And this gets a little in depth, but in those options there's two items, the Lincoln and the Laramie. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit continue, and I'm just going to let it run. But that's what generated this list. I didn't write any of the HTML that it wrote right here. I just had this Razor syntax to do that. That is typically how you would replace something like this. This is hard-coded HTML. This is just raw HTML. Over here, this is Razor with some C# syntax in it to dynamically create this code. I didn't write this code right here. I just wrote the Razor for it, and it created it. And the Razor syntax created it. This Razor code is being ran on the server, not on the browser. The browser knew nothing about this Razor code. The Razor gets ran on the server, and when the server goes to spit out or render the HTML, send the HTML to the browser, it just sends this. It doesn't actually send this. It executes this part and spits out this code. I hope that helps understand how to replace select HTML, a drop down in HTML, with Razor syntax using the model that you've passed in to your view, to this HTML page.